I just wanted to talk a little bit about the benefits of growing your own food over winter. And a lot of people like to take a break over winter. And I think especially if you're retired like I am, then there's some real benefits to just carrying on. So the first benefit is just a financial benefit. You know, we grow a huge amount of food. And, you know, I think right now we've grown somewhere in the region of £4,000 worth of veg from sort of October time through to sort of mid-spring, something like that. And you know, it makes a big difference to me and my family, our finances. And of course, that means we've also eaten a huge amount of fresh food at a time when a lot of food that we're eating is imported. And so we're eating beautiful fresh food that just tastes incomparably better than imported food. Now in summer we're generally eating food that's grown in this country, so we don't have quite so much of an advantage. The other thing is winter growing is really easy, so the bang for the buck is really quite substantial. And what I mean by that is that there's effectively no weeds, there's very little watering, there's very few pests, there's almost no sowing and planting to do, because one sowing in sort of August, September time and one planting in September, October time sees you through for about 6 months of continuous harvest. So that is pretty impressive as well. And the taste of winter veggies is really beautiful, especially if you grow them under cover. If you grow them outside, then they tend to be a bit tough. You know, they really toughen up in order to cope with the wind and the rain and the hail and the snow and all of that. But if you grow them under cover, just in a cold frame, a low tunnel or a polytunnel like the one I'm standing in now, then the leaves are really tender and crisp. So if you want to know a little bit more about growing under cover, take a look at my ebook linked in the description below. Go into the basics section and pick growing under cover. And I've also, and this goes you through all the different types of cover, from, you know, just generally raised beds, mesh, fleece, cloches, cold frames, low tunnels, high tunnels, greenhouses, etc, etc. So this is really useful, and there's loads of embedded videos in here. And also there's a specific guide just on polytunnel gardening, and this goes through all about my polytunnel, how to capture water off your polytunnel, making best use of the polytunnel environment, designing your own polytunnel, designing your planting plans, etc, etc. So the other great thing is that you're on the plot. You've got something to do. You've got, you know, you're out in your garden, you're out on your allotment, you're talking to people, you're in the fresh air, you're getting exercise, you've got something to get out of bed for every morning, which is really quite important when you're retired, because not every day is a great day for cycling or hiking or whatever other hobbies you've got. You know, but every day is okay on the allotment, especially if you've got a shed or a polytunnel or somewhere to shelter in. And because you're always out on the plot harvesting, you know, basically just tweaking things, looking after things, pottering around, then, and by always out on the plot I mean for an hour a day or something like that, that's the amount of time I generally spend in winter, then any little weeds that are there, you're just pulling those out. There's not very many, you're just basically keeping an eye on things. And so when it comes to spring, there's not a lot of work to do to transition your beds over to your summer planting, because you've been looking after them all the way through winter. Now, one of the big benefits of looking after them is that you've got growing roots in the soil, and growing roots are pushing into the soil exudates, root secretions basically, sugars, which are feeding the microorganisms in the soil. And that sort of kicks into life the whole soil food web, and that's, you know, that's just really great for the soil. Now if you also grow under cover, cold frames, low tunnels, polytunnel, etc, then you can also keep your beds at kind of optimum hydration levels, so they don't get really soaking wet like they would if they were just outside. And raised beds help with this too, because they drain better. But beds that are at good hydration levels have the right balance between fungal and bacterial microorganisms, and so you keep your beds at that optimum level for growing. A soaking wet bed tends to become bacterially dominated, and that's not so good for veg levels and so for veg growing. And so it takes some time into sort of spring for everything to dry out and for that microorganism balance to get back into sort of the optimum state for growing. But I think one of the underrated benefits is that although growing actually over winter doesn't yield a huge amount of food, having plants in place in late February, early March that are mature means that you get a really abundant harvest in early spring. And to give you an example of that, here's a few of the harvests that we've done over the last few weeks, and you can see, you know, that's quite a nice harvest, I think. And we're currently harvesting at a rate somewhere around 250 pounds of veg, no fruit at the moment, but 250 pounds of veg a week. And the final benefit, I think, is that you're not in a rush to put your summer crops in. So you're not generally in this position where you've got empty beds and you've got all this pent-up growing frustration where you really want to get your tomatoes and your cucumbers and your peppers and your courgettes and whatever in the ground really early, because you really love growing and these plants are just sitting there on the windowsills waiting to be planted out, and they've got too much, everything's overflowing with these summer plants. But if you're growing over winter and early spring, and if you're growing cool weather crops in spring, then all of your cold frames, all of your low tunnels, all of your polytunnel is absolutely full of those spring crops. So you're harvesting all your calabrese and your carrots and your your turnips and your spinaches and your lettuces and your radishes, etc, 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 and cauliflowers and whatever. So you're harvesting all of those in spring, and you've got all this abundance, and so there just isn't quite so much pressure to put yourself under the pressure of growing really early summer crops. So I think that's a really nice benefit, and in some ways you don't need to delay your summer crops either, because all you do is you interplant them into your spring crops. Just make a space, you know, harvest a spinach or a couple of spinach plants, pop a pepper in the middle of them, that sort of thing. And as a result of that, you know, you don't really miss out. You don't really miss out on any summer harvests. You get all that spring harvest, you get that bonus winter harvest, you bolster your finances, you give yourself some exercise, you keep your mental health good, you see lots of people, you know, it's just great. So that's my little in praise of winter growing. So if you want to do a bit of winter growing, I think the best place to start is back in my little ebook again, and the year-round growing guides. That takes you through a whole range of different types of food and how to grow them all year round. Hope you enjoyed this quick video. My name's Steve. This is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.